is a very big worldview as well, which says there's no God at all. What are some examples of these worldviews? Well, in theism, we have, of course, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. For pantheism, we have all kinds of the Eastern religions, right? Zen Buddhism. Somebody likes Star Wars. Use the Force, right? Or is that Darth Vader? That's more like Yoda. That's all impersonable force. Basically, you can tap into this good and bad energy to get whatever you want, type of thing. Hinduism and New Age all fall within this worldview we call pantheism. And of course, atheism, we have humanism, right? There's not a whole lot of religions that fall into this unless you really define atheism as a religion. If you define religion broadly as explanation as to how we're here, what the purpose of life is and all that, and what your beliefs are, then atheism should be classified as a religion as well, because it does have views on that. So we're going to present the three classical arguments for the existence of God. That quick video covered it in about 30 seconds, but we're going to take a little bit more time unpacking that, okay? And the three major arguments are the cosmological argument, which is the argument from the beginning, the design argument, fancy word teleological, which is Greek for design, and the moral argument for God, okay? Let's take a look at the first one. The cosmological argument basically says, in a logical syllogism, says everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe must have a cause. Now, we can pretty much say that everything that had a beginning had a cause. It's common sense. So what we really have to prove here is that the universe had a beginning. Well, what does the generally accepted science right now tell us about the universe? Does it say that it has right, it's the Big Bang Theory, right? That's exactly right. Now, you're saying, but Isaac, I'm a Christian. I don't believe in the Big Bang Theory. Well, I don't necessarily believe in the Big Bang Theory because it says basically that the whole universe came out of nothing. I believe in a Big Bang event, which is consistent with Genesis 1:1. And I'm going to show you that, the evidence for that is very strong. But before I do, I want to point out that there's only two possible explanations for the universe. Either it had a beginning or it did not have a beginning. Okay? Let's take a look. And what I'm going to do to help us remember some of these points, 5 major points, is an acronym called SURGE, S-U-R-G-E, where S is the second law of thermodynamics, U is for the universe is expanding, R is for radiation afterglow, G is for great galaxy seeds, and E is for Einstein's theory of relativity. Now you guys are looking at me and saying, man, I do not want this to be a science course right now. But why are we studying this? Because this stuff points to God. And I'm going to make it simple, okay? I'm going to make this real simple for all of us to understand, including myself. Now, in the beginning there was a Big Bang. Now, I believe in a Big Bang because I know who banged it, okay? What does science tell us? Well, the S in SURGE is for the second law of thermodynamics. Now, any science geeks in the house?
Yeah.
I'm one of them. I'm one of them, so don't feel offended. Okay. The first law of thermodynamics tells us that basically all of the energy in the universe is constant. Okay? It's a closed universe system. And that means that there's no new energy coming into the universe and none escaping. It all stays in there. Okay? The second law says that that energy is running out of energy. Think about it this way. If you leave a flashlight turned on from the beginning of time, if time was eternal, would that flashlight still be running or lighting? No, because it's running out of energy. We all know this, okay? We also know it as the law of entropy. Anybody heard that before? Yeah. Look at your room. Your room doesn't go from a state of mess to neatness, does it? It kind of goes from neat to mess. That's the law of entropy, right? So basically, the S, the second law of let me go back one. The second law of thermodynamics basically says is if the universe was eternal, had always existed, and it's running out of energy, would the sun still be shining? Would the planets still be? Would there be any energy left? Again, from eternity. The obvious answer is no, it could not. The U in SURGE stands for, there's the second law of thermodynamics in play right now. There we go. Hey! Okay. Okay, so the U in surge is that the universe is expanding. Okay, scientists now have been able to observe actually stars, and they can detect, because of a redshift, that the stars are actually moving away from everywhere. So the universe is actually expanding, and it's actually accelerating. And what that implies is that if we were to reel back time, like reversing a movie, rewinding a movie rather, what would happen is everything would eventually come back into a single point. Infinite single point, which they call singularity. It only happened a single time in time. Okay? So the U for universe is expanding is another evidence that the universe had a beginning. The R is for the radiation afterglow. These two guys, Arnold Penzias and Robert Wilson, in the 60s, they were doing some experiments for Bell Labs, and there was this telescope that was more like looked like a radar that picks up sound. And they kept getting this static noise, and they didn't know what was happening. They thought it was pigeons in there with their droppings and all. They cleaned it all out, and it still kept hearing this static noise. And eventually, it was discovered that what they were hearing was the heat energy, the sounds of the Big Bang. As heat and light expands, it actually turns into heat energy, and you can actually pick the sounds up. And they actually won the Nobel Prize in 1978 for this discovery. And in fact, a lot of mathematicians and scientists were calculating, well, if the Big Bang did occur, then the way the heat would dissipate and all the expansion would be in such a way where there would be some variations in temperature. And sure enough, in the NASA sent up a COBE, a Cosmic Background Explorer, and I think it was in 1989. The next slide might tell us. 1992, sorry. And the COBE, after 3 years of doing testing, actually confirmed the same calculations that were projected. Again, establishing that. And what these are, these great galaxy seeds, are different temperature graduations that allowed planets and galaxies to actually form because of different temperature differences. One of the leading explorers, George Smoot, actually said, and he's not a Christian by any stretch, he says, if you're religious, it's like looking at the fingerprints of God. Stephen Hawking even said it's one of the greatest cosmological findings of all time. Okay? And the Nobel Prize was also awarded for this discovery. E is for Einstein's theory of relativity, and what basically Einstein's theory says that all of time, matter, energy, space, everything is codependent, correlative. They all have to exist together. You cannot have one without the rest. And they all came into existence at one time. One time. Think about that. Before that, there was no time. Well, there's no before that, right? No time, no space, no time, no energy. Again, proving that all of matter, space, time, all had a beginning, came into existence. And if you disagreed with Einstein, he would probably give you that. In fact, you know, when Einstein actually discovered his calculations, he didn't like what it was implying, because right before the 1900s, scientists believed that the universe was static. It was eternal. It always was there. But as scientific evidence kept pouring in, they now had to change their mind. Wow, the universe had a beginning. What does that imply? If something has a beginning, it has a beginner. A beginner. It will have an end. Biblically, we know that, a renewal. But it has a beginner, right? And in fact, Einstein didn't like that so much. He said his calculations were irritating. Scientists saying calculations are irritating. Okay? He had already a philosophy. He was actually like a pantheist, not really a theist at all, even though he was Jewish. And what he did was he was dividing by zero. And any guys that know, you don't divide by zero. There was a scientist later that discovered his mistake and was corrected. Let me give you some quotes. This is Robert Jastrow. He's an agnostic. Okay, now agnostic means that they really don't know if there's a God or anything, or they said there's no way they can know. Okay, he says astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The essential element in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis is the same. That's in his book God and the Astronomers, page 14. He goes on to say, astronomers now find they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in this cosmos and on the earth. And they have found that all this happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. Wow. Why does he say supernatural forces? Because there were no natural forces prior to the Big Bang, the singularity event, right? The Big Bang event. Here's another, this is an atheist actually, at least an honest one. He says, according to the Big Bang theory, the whole matter of the universe began to exist at a particular time in the remote past. A proponent of such a theory, at least if he is an atheist, must believe that the matter of the universe came from nothing and by nothing. He's an honest atheist. You have to believe that nothing created everything. That makes sense, right? So you have to ask yourself, what is more reasonable to you? That that no one created something out of nothing, the atheistic view, or that someone created something out of nothing? Okay? One question to ask an atheist, I say, well, if there is no God, then why is there something rather than nothing at all? That's a real difficult question for them. They don't have answers to these, by the way. And the ones